why teams are members and why some teams are not. There has to, in my opinion, there has to be a pathway for any club who meets a certain criteria to become a member or an observed member or something that gives them a element of voting rights and a responsibility for the broader, promotion of the game. To me, it makes no sense why some small League One teams are members, whereas teams like Toulouse and Toronto are not. And we need to look. If we are opening ourselves up to teams outside of our borders, then I think we need to have an agreed approach to how we integrate these teams in a reasonable way that clarifies their
about a fully formed plan.
Yeah, they have rights. In my opinion, they have rights, but that should encompass some responsibilities, and those responsibilities should be joint. So all members, no matter whether you're a Super League club or Championship or League One or community game or whatever, you should have a joint responsibility for the promotion of the game. But also an expectation that you will be supported by the governing body. To me, that's a fundamental part of being part of a team sport or an organised sport. And that I think these teams have been let down badly by the RFL on this particular occasion.
Yeah, and whilst we're sympathising with the teams, it's fair to mention Matt McLeod, who's a Toronto fan at Matt McLeod. Very, very convenient. He said it wasn't an option for them as such. They were told they had to pay to be included. So that's just kind of trying to underline, because I think the initial backlash was probably against the clubs, and particular Toronto, because there's a lot of backlash against Toronto. There's various reasons for some of that, but then it shifted as the sort of story rolls through and the night went on, and the sort of people within the game and the media people within the game started to comment over the last 24 hours or so. It's the criticism has shifted to the RFL for the lack of foresight, the lack of confidence, the lack of planning and that sort of stuff. Paul Michael Craig at PaulMac_78 said, "It makes RL look like a second-rate sport." I hate to break it to Paul, but unfortunately over here it is. He said, "Would rugby union stop Italian teams entering the Heineken Cup just in case they made the final?" Yeah, so I think it is a little bit of the RFL haven't stopped anyone from doing anything. They've just put extra conditionality upon these clubs. It is silly though, isn't it? How can you have a plan for expansion to grow your global brand whilst excluding one of your most prized assets from their grasp?
Yeah, it doesn't. It appears to be a short-termist decision based on, as I say, fear of failure, fear of financial loss, rather than looking at it as an opportunity to change the way that the sport is governed
and the way that the sport is marketed, the way that the sport is sold.
Yeah,
I agree. So that's like the views we've had in from around. I suppose one thing that it's better to talk about, as well as just sort of whinging and moaning and criticising, Al, is what alternative options might have been put forward that could have been a little bit better of a ground. So I would suggest, how about making them agree to withhold some prize money rather than them promising to put down a fee or pay a charge or pay a bond or put an insurance contract in place or whatever. How about an agreement that they would pass up some of their prize money? It doesn't take away the prestige as much then, does it?
No, I mean, and what I don't fully understand is and you might have to fill me in here about the the rights to ticket revenue in terms of what's sold at the varying rounds and what goes into the semi-finals and then the final. I don't know if there is a revenue sharing.
My understanding is in Challenge Cup games there's a revenue sharing on ticket sales, not just a ability to take the revenue from the tickets you've sold yourself, but there is a sharing across the board. So that's why it's often beneficial for smaller clubs to play away at the larger clubs, and the larger clubs don't necessarily love it because the larger club will end up with a much smaller attendance than their average gate and get a much smaller cut from the takings of it too for the pleasure of putting it on. But yeah, my understanding is there's a pretty equal split along the match day revenues, and I also know from following things with my club Wigan that Ian Lenigan talks a lot about getting to a Challenge Cup final is very financially beneficial for the club and the club's accounts, and not necessarily whether they win it or not, but getting to it is the crucial part. Apparently it does earn a lot more money getting to the Challenge Cup final than it does getting to the Grand Final, for example.
And is that in fans, tickets, merchandise, travel, or is it about prize money?
I'm not entirely certain, but I would guess it's within the ticket selling aspect of it more than the prize money aspect of it. I have no idea what the prize money is for the Challenge Cup, if I'm perfectly honest. And the competition, don't forget, next year, currently, as it stands, has no sponsor. So that would really affect the prize money and the ability to front up costs. You'd use some of that money you're getting from your sponsor to put down on the costs of renting Wembley Stadium, for example. If we don't have a sponsor, that to me is as big an issue, as big a conversation as this. And the new logo for the Challenge Cup looks absolutely beautiful. I love it. It's so well designed, so well styled. And so the money that was spent on that is money well spent for the digital imaging company that the RFL are using, or what have you. Yeah. But if there's no sponsor, that reduces all the other stuff. And so instead of going out and chasing a sponsor and chasing a different kind of audience and a different way of getting your grounds, your stadium full for the final and the semi-finals as well, because that'll be a double header again, we expect, but we don't know for sure. This is getting a bit silly. We should have known that by now, we would have thought. But anyway, instead of doing it that way, they've put the onus on these forward-thinking clubs that they have invited into it and then seem to be trying to keep them at arm's length.
Yeah.
To me, there was a different solution, a solution that would mean that they may forego some of the benefits, financial benefits of reaching the Challenge Cup final, but not have to put down a fee to have the possibility of earning that.
Yeah,
work it backwards, not forwards. Put a whole negative cloud over the whole thing.
Yes.
With this, when in reality, the likelihood of either of them getting there is quite small if they were in it, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah.
Because
it's
not
a
forget,
risky mitigate, isn't it?
The Wolfpack's lowest moment in 2018 probably wasn't that loss to the London Broncos in the really tight, low-scoring £1 million game. It was probably the absolute disgrace they made of themselves as a team on the field in that game at Warrington.
Yeah, no, I'd completely agree. It was a bit of there was a bit of a bubble bursting kind of atmosphere to that. Not just in the performance, as you say. It's more about the professionalism and the approach on the field was not a good look, to say the least.
No, not at all.
I mean, the thing. I mean, any organisation worth their salt should be mitigating risk as they go on. So. As you get to your next rounds, you talk about who you as you get later on, who are your potential semi-finalists, where are we holding this game? This is what happens as you go along. You have contingency plans. You plan ahead. You do things around it. You don't let things happen to you, which is, to me, if you look at this year, that's what it felt like with the Catalan situation. It felt like it surprised them that they got to the final, even though they knew they were in the semis God knows how many months I can't remember the quarter
Well,
final.
the Captain's Nichols in the semis was practically quarter season, wasn't it?
So you knew that this was a distinct possibility. So it should have absolutely been part of your reckoning. It should have been part of your planning. I mean, one thing we talked about.
Should we give them credit for putting it into the planning this time around then, but not necessarily the way they've done it, but at least they've thought about it.
At least they've thought about it. They've gone the ER route of worst case scenario. I think obviously there is a key issue here about not having a sponsor for the Premier Cup competition. I mean, going back, people I used to work with who worked or tried to work with the RFL. From a commercial point of view, found them frustratingly amateurish in the way that they tried to approach sponsors. It was very kind of going through the kind of the FTSE 100 type thing of, would you like to sponsor us? The kind of thing. It wasn't a nuanced approach to potential sponsors. So it never surprises me when we're struggling for a sponsor that isn't a betting company or whatever else is.
Wouldn't a sponsor want the opportunity to be involved in a intercontinental competition? I mean, Paul talked about the Heineken Cup, and obviously we don't have a European Cup type competition in rugby league, and so there is a slight difference there. But the analogy works reasonably well. But and I know we're talking about an alcohol brand, and actually they don't sponsor that cup anymore because of restrictions on that sort of stuff anyway. But you're talking about what people would want to be involved in, what people would want to associate themselves in, and surely a cosmopolitan international cities against cities is way more appealing, a way more appealing sell anyway. You're going to get an audience in France, you're going to get an audience in Canada, and that's on top of your existing audience in the north of the UK and small pockets outside of the north of the UK as well, and on the east coast of Australia, and again small pockets around the rest of Australia too. So why wouldn't you want to be selling that and make up the difference in that way? It is like getting rid of the problem rather than looking for a solution. Is a simple
it's looking at it as a threat rather than an opportunity.
So what other solutions do you think you would suggest, Al?
For this specific issue, I'd be interested to know what it would cost to insure against it as a risk. Any kind of corporate organisation would insure against the likelihood of a known scenario. It's common in certain football, kind of footballers' contracts in terms of in case they, the contract is due to be paid to a certain value, but if they do a certain thing, and you insure against that happening. So if they score 30 goals a season, the contract is worth X. There are professionals who insure against. You can insure against that, and that's an in-house approach to it that you would take.
What you're talking about there is deducting money rather than making them pay you money, isn't it? So it's a different way around, but maybe a more satisfying way around for all involved. Yeah,
you keep it in-house though. You don't. It's not splashed in front of the newspapers and yet again a negative story for rugby league. You make sure that the Red Star Belgrade story and the community clubs that are involved and the spread of the geographical spread of the cup competition is your front and centre thing that everyone's talking about, and you deal with it because no one cares about insurance, no one's interested in it. Not even the trade papers would be interested in that. So you would deal with that internally, and it would be on the balance sheet of the RFL, and nobody would give two hoots at the end of the year about it. And that would be that's the way that you would govern it and the way that you would manage it, in my opinion.
The other thing, you talked about, becoming best mates with Steve Mascord and following him all week and all that. But no, in all seriousness, Steve was on another show that likes to run long, like the Super League pod. Long, normal shows like to run long. So the final thing I want to talk about is something that I like Steve. I agree with a lot of things Steve says. I've spoken at length with stuff about Steve. I've been on his show and as well in the past. But I don't like his solution as well, which was move away from Wembley.